Yes, and thanks. You should have just gotten a reminder that, or a notification that this recording is going to be updated or recorded. Yeah, just a heads up that it'd be great for us to share this recording for those who couldn't make it today. I think we're good for the next slide. We have some folks from Seattle, from Renton, Tacoma, Olympia. Awesome. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Poverty Action's work, they're an organization based in Seattle, building grassroots power to fight for a Washington state and world where all of us can put food on our tables, we can pay for our basic needs, and really pursue our own goals in life, no matter our backgrounds or our contexts. And one of the only ways to do that is by centering the voices of those who have experienced poverty and the broken systems that we're seeking to change, which is a huge part of why we're all here today. So some quick housekeeping notes before we jump in. I think everyone is doing a really great job with this already, but if you can, if you're not talking, just keep your mic muted. Feel free to use the chat and take care of yourselves. I know we're together for the next couple hours, so please take breaks as you need. And again, heads up that this session together will be recorded. So before we dive in, I think we're going to do a land and labor acknowledgement. So next slide, please. We realize that it's important for us as advocates and organizers to recognize that we do this work on stolen land. And for us to be able to move forward, we'll have to find ways to not only acknowledge, but also repay the debt owed to Indigenous peoples who stewarded this land for centuries before colonization. So to start, you can find out whose traditional land you're tuning in from today with this link that you see on the slide, which hopefully someone can throw in the chat as well. We'd also like to do a labor acknowledgement. So if the next slide, thank you. At Poverty Action, we recognize that in this capitalist system that we operate in, labor makes everything move, both in the present and throughout our past. And at Poverty Action, we acknowledge that much of this country, including its culture, its economic development and wealth, now and throughout history have been made possible by forced labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants who suffered and continue to suffer the horrors of the transatlantic kidnapping, chattel slavery, Jim Crow laws, the war on drugs, and the continuance of state-sanctioned violence. We are indebted to their labor and undue sacrifice, and we acknowledge the impacts of that violence throughout the last 500 years and the resulting traumas that are still felt today. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Poverty Action's Sean Scott, who's going to take us back in the last 25 years of Poverty Action's work.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Finika, for that introduction, for the labor acknowledgement, for the land acknowledgement. My name is Sean Scott, he, him pronouns. I am the policy and field campaign manager here at Statewide Poverty Action Network. If you know anything about Poverty Action, you know that really since 1996, our mission has been to help to work to secure the building blocks of equity and economic security in all four corners of Washington state. Our mission is really to preserve and to strengthen the social safety net. And that mission, I think, is in a lot of ways as pressing today as it was when we were founded a quarter century ago. I'm going to drop in the chat a link to an article that I had written last year when we were, in the middle of the fight to pass the Working Families Tax Credit, which fortunately did pass and really kind of represents a great culminating achievement, I should say, of the work that we have been doing for the last 25 years. But knowing that, in these unprecedented times where people are talking about how unprecedented the times are, in an unprecedented multitude of ways, right? We want to make sure that we're grounded in this past, but also having our eyes as firmly fixed on the future and what change in the present can look like as well. As we move to the next slide. Our goal in this 2022 Washington State legislative session is really going to be to do what we've been doing for the last 25 years, but to do it even better with all of the challenges in front of us between the global pandemic, the referendum on racism that we are living through at this moment, the impending climate crisis. I think the need for an organization that has a philosophy that says we're going to build strong relationships with organizers, strong relationships with advocates, and also with lawmakers who really understand and get the pressing need for bold legislative solutions to these challenges. Again, I think that is a mission that is as pressing today, if not even more than it was 25 years ago. One of the things that we are really, really proud to conduct here at Poverty Action is listening sessions. And I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit more depth shortly. But those sessions really do place us in, or give us a very, very clear perspective and a firm perspective about what vulnerable and targeted groups across the state really care about, as well as what advocates are caring about and needing to see legislative action on. So we're really looking forward to having this session reflect a lot of that feedback that we have received before the session even started, as we move to the next slide. Historically, this has really been the way that we sort of kick off a new year of advocacy and transformation. Change is in a lot of ways inevitable. I think the thing that we have to do is make sure that that change is going to be for the positive, for people that actually need to see government work as hard as we have and as we do, especially over the last couple of years. So I'm really excited to see our event be as well attended as it is, with so many folks who are dialed into the work that Poverty Action does, and just looking forward to hearing from everybody about how their lawmaker meetings go. And I hope we have a great lobby day to get this legislative session kicked off, as we go to the next slide. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Sean. All the work that Sean's been talking about and that Poverty Action has done over the years just isn't possible without our volunteers and partners. So a quick kudos and deep gratitude to the Washington Budget and Policy Center for letting us use their huge Zoom account today and helping out with the translation and closed captioning that folks are able to access. A shout out to our parent organization, Solid Ground, for helping with all the printed and online materials that folks are accessing and providing administrative and fundraising support. And of course, a warm welcome to our partners from around the state, who, without their support and energy, we wouldn't be able to do this work and gather everyone like we are today. Now, next slide, please. A big part of today in our lobby day is raising our voices and sharing our stories. So to help get us fired up and inspired for the day ahead, we're going to hear from two amazing community members as they speak their truths to power. Both of these folks have been leaders in Poverty Action's work to ensure that our state government prioritizes the input and feedback from community members in their decision making. So first, we're going to hear from Charisse Rhodes today. Charisse is a member of the Poverty Reduction Work Group Steering Committee. She's a Head Start Parent Ambassador, a member of United Parent Leaders Action Network, coordinator for South King County Discipline Coalition, a community and family resiliency lead for supporting partnerships for education and beyond, and she's a facilitator at the Community Cafe Collaborative. She's a survivor, a parent, and a dedicated community leader who works to ensure that the people who come behind her will live in a world that's more just and have the opportunity to be the writers of their own stories. And then we'll hear from Jaguna Gisharu. Jaguna is a Seattle-based community economic development leader who specializes in advancing economic models that shift power back to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. He drives transformative change by supporting the development of initiatives, institutions, and individuals that are leading the just transition to a regenerative economy. He's deeply committed to the legacy of his leadership he has inherited from his parents, who were pioneering organizers in Seattle's African immigrant communities. So please join me in giving a really warm welcome to Charisse and Jaguna for joining us today.
Thank you. So first I want to say welcome. So whether if this is your first time, your fifth time and 10th time, I also want to say I'm a parent and somebody misunderstood the assignment. So if you hear the snoring in the background, that's one of my kiddos. So with that being said, first I want to talk about what an advocate is. That is just simply someone who supports or recommends a particular change to a cause or to a policy. I want you guys to let that sit and marinate with you just for a second, because I don't have that much time. But I say that to say, first of all, to start off with this, we're all advocates. So whether that is talking to your doctor about a prescription that doesn't work, whether that is all the times that you've been at that DSHS office explaining on how they have stroked one of those keys a little wrong on how much they feel that you make, but how much you actually bring in, whether that is talking to your child's principal, which I've had many of experiences with that, on how a discipline is unjust, right? This is not a superhero cape that we put on. This is something that we do because of the fact that a lot of times people don't understand the whole narrative, right? They take that little piece of data and they think that they can spin the whole picture of everything that's going on. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I don't know about y'all, but I'm tired of people trying to write my narrative. So saying all that, let me give you a little backstory on who I am. I am a person who was born into poverty, generationally. And when I mean born into poverty, I was born on the steps of, they don't have these projects anymore, but High Point projects. That's where I made my transition into the world, right? So when I say I was born into it, literally born into it. And I feel like where my my change happened was just getting sick and tired of people feeling like they knew me before they actually got to know me, right? Like other people, allowing other people to set the bar on how far I could go or the changes that I could make. And then the other thing that kind of sparked my interest was just the love of the snoring son in the background. Being tired of what it looked like for him, especially with him having special needs, and how when I did the things the way that the system said I was supposed to do, how I don't know, things were completely unfair for him. So again, it wasn't a superhero cape that I put on. It was just the need and a desire in order to make change. So how it all started for me was just coming to an advocacy day, just like how you guys are here. And learning from having those conversations with legislators who I felt like were above me, or I'm not gonna lie, sugarcoat it, who I thought were better than me and who I felt like had all the answers. But what I learned was they get the data, but what they don't get is that personal story. So what they don't understand is how that House bill is going to make the situation better for us. And we should not allow them to feel like they know all, because of the fact that one thing I've learned through my journey on whether or not it's been advocating in Olympia or Washington, D.C., that the way that they push, or a real legislator pushes for that effective change, is by their constituents telling their personal stories. So I said that like I didn't have a superpower or a superhero cape, but the whole thing is you do. Just by being a constituent, You have that right to be heard, to be listened to understand, and to build those relationships in order for us to start making true and effective change. So that's the one thing. I want you guys to understand that you have superpower just by being that constituent, just by being that voting member, even if you can't vote, just by you having the sheer power to inform others in order to help our plights, that's your superpower strength. Again, like I said before, it was generational things for me. But because of the fact that I want to give my children the ability to be better than me, that is why I stand up. That is why I continue to like to be in solidarity with all of my friends that I've seen on this call, those that I have met and those that I have yet met through our personal voice, through our personal stories. That is how we're going to make effective and lasting change. So please do not be afraid of what you're doing today. This is the first step to really be making a long-lasting change. And the better thing is, it's a lot easier this time around because we didn't have to get up 2 hours earlier to search around for parking. So if I leave you guys with anything, I want to leave you with this. Just as easy as everyone thinks that I'm a true advocate or this true spirit or person of change, all it is just being sick and tired of other people writing the narrative for me. And the one thing that I can say to you, if you don't hear anything else that I've said, that, you know, those that are the closest to the struggle need to be the closest to the solution. Those that feel like they have been disregarded, dehumanized, and unheard, we have to find a way to better advocate and stand up for each other. Yeah, and the last thing I want to say is I want to leave you guys with a quote from Maya Angelou. And I may mess up the quote, but I'm a little nervous. And that quote is, people appreciate the beauty of a butterfly, but a lot of times they don't appreciate that transformational change that it has went through in order to, you know, become that beautiful thing. All of you that are in this space, you guys are butterflies. You guys are making transformational change. Even if you don't feel it yet, you guys are breaking down those walls and making those bridges. I wish I was there in person with you, but we got this. And we have to stop allowing other people to write our narratives. You know, there should be nothing about us done without us. Remember that. Other than that, I send my love. We got this.
Thank you. Thank you, Charisse. Those were amazing words. Hello, everybody. My name is Jaguna Gishoro. I'm a lab leader with the People's Economy Lab, and I'm very happy to be here this morning. I think I'll start off just by making an introduction to myself and my work. Currently, the People's Economy Lab is working with statewide poverty action network and front and centered, and with community-based organizations in Washington State to host and facilitate community listening sessions for the Just Futures Project. And that's what connected me to the organization and this event. And this is an initiative to develop a community vision and metrics for a just and equitable economy and an accountability process for Washington State in policy programs and funding. We came into alignment with Statewide Poverty Action Network because the People's Economy Lab works to advance a transition to a restorative economy in Washington State by supporting the development of new economic systems that center and empower Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We work within the Just Transition framework, recognizing that it is sort of the fundamentals of the economy that are wrong, that cause poverty and other problems for our people and many other people in this system. And so we work directly with community groups to connect and align visionary leaders and organization, and then to build the community's capacity to reshape the economy. And so we are very passionate about shared learning, shared organizing, and shared advocacy, and really are excited about being on this call with folks that are really doing the work of reshaping policy and reshaping how our government works. Part of the Just Futures project we're working on focuses on co-governance and new ways of communities deepening democracy and really creating government actions and policies that serve their needs. And so we think that days like this and organizations and gatherings like this are really important because we know that this is a critical time for our communities where change is becoming more urgent. As we've experienced the pandemic, we experienced continued economic destruction in our communities, and we experience social disruption. And so we found that our work with frontline communities has just advanced the conviction that organizing and advocacy at the state level, at the local level, and at the federal level is really crucial. And so we're happy to be here. And so we're happy to connect with the organizations and the leaders that are here. One of the things that we really advocate for is really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in our economy, and really thinking more imaginatively and thinking a little more radically about what the economy is. When we look fundamentally at the word economy, it simply means to manage home, and that we really focus on the fact with our communities that the economy is something that we define for ourselves by creating the rules in government. But too often, those rules are created by the few and not the many, and they're created for the purpose of enclosure of wealth and power. And so advocacy, sort of a reframing of the economy is necessary, and really advocacy around reframing that officially through policy is really critical. And so we're excited to work with organizations and advocates that are doing that work. Our role is really to work with our community leaders on the front lines and to help them understand the framework of the economy that we advocate for, and then to build their capacity to build new models, to test new models, and to build change, and then to partner with other organizations and groups to really advocate for those changes. And so what we've been hearing from the groups that we've been working with on the front lines in South Seattle, South King County, the Central District of Seattle, is that communities are really, and community leaders have really been tasked with carrying the recovery of people in their communities. And throughout the COVID crisis and throughout the recovery from that crisis, advocating for programs, systems, and responses that really do center our communities and that use this opportunity to really create a shift. It's been a tremendously challenging few years for our community leaders and our organizations, but our people have stepped up tremendously. And we found in this sort of moment of crisis that community leaders and organizations have really been innovating, leading, and advocating for the shifts in the economy that have been necessary for a long time. And so it's a pleasure to be here to connect with everybody on this call. I think that it's continues to be a time where this work is crucial and critical. This continues to be a state where we have a tremendous well of leadership, of support, and of genius that's connecting constantly. And so I'm really excited about 2022 and about the potential for progress and for change. And so I look forward to being present for today's sessions, hearing from folks about the work and the advocacy, and finding ways to align our work so that we can continue to push things forward for our communities at the state level and even at our local levels. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to connect and work with everybody.
Jaguna and Charisse, thank you both so much for taking the time and sharing your truths and reminding us of why we are here today, and helping us root ourselves in our own power and what we can achieve together. So folks, let's throw some love for Jaguna and Charisse in the chat, please, or maybe with some Zoom reactions. I really appreciate you all sharing yourselves today. Now from a little shift of gears, we're going to have Abby from Poverty Action come and join us and help introduce us to the themes and needs that we heard from folks across the state this year.
Yeah, thanks so much, Phoenica, and thank you to the speakers. That was amazing. I just want to do a quick overview. Here at Poverty Action, we conduct listening sessions every other year in all 4 corners of Washington State. This fall, we went to Kent, Vancouver, Yakima, and Spokane, and heard from residents in each of those areas. And there were some major themes that emerged that align nicely, and you'll see how we sort of implement them into our policy priorities. These major themes from 2021 were that families are really facing debt and are forced to get really creative and stretch resources and make tough decisions with their finances. Lots of folks are unable to get the dental care that they need, which just adds on to that debt that we previously mentioned. Eligibility requirements for basic needs programs are really restrictive and confusing. We heard a lot of stories of just the complexity of those programs. And then finally, community safety and mental health resources are lacking in a lot of communities across the state. So having a lot of discussions about building up community support services, and this was only made more evident by the pandemic. And so this is just big overarching themes of what we heard at the listening sessions across the state. But I will hand it over to Leanna to see how we fit those into some of our policy priorities for this year.
There's the unmute button. Oh, so sorry, everybody. Hello. Thank you so much for that recap, Abby, and for sharing with us all about what we heard. And yeah, I'm just so excited to see all of these names, all of these faces here today. And wish we could all be together, but getting a lot of life just seeing everyone here and participating today. Here are our policy priorities. We have the ones you can see on the screen already: meeting basic needs, getting cash into people's pockets, expanding access to dental care, safety and civil rights, and removing barriers to reentry. I am the basic needs campaign lead, so my video's not on here, that'll help. So I will jump in and share with y'all about what we're doing to help folks meet their basic needs in our state. Okay, so when it comes to meeting basic needs, that's just foundational. People should be able to meet their basic needs. It's as simple as that. And so there's 2 main areas that we work in. One is helping to refine and make better the state-run cash assistance programs that are in Washington, like you may have heard of TANF and EBD or HEN. And then there's also supporting innovative poverty reduction efforts. So let me tell you about what we're working on this session. So the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, or TANF, is the cash assistance program for families in our state. And there are a lot of hurdles and a lot of issues that come up with this program, but it does help folks meet their basic needs and provides a baseline of cash. So one of the things that we are working on this year and have been working on for the last couple of years is making sure that if people need help, they can get it. So at the federal level, there is a 60-month limit for this program. So once you reach 60 months in your lifetime, then you're cut off unless you meet these really narrow pockets to get into it. But we think that if you still need help, you should still get it. It doesn't matter what kind of timeline you've been on. If you need help, you need help. So you should be able to access it. So we're helping introduce a bill this year that would broaden those hardship exemptions to make sure that there's access to that help. That also applies to children. So there are kids who qualify for the program whose parents or caregivers do not. That's often mixed status families where the children are citizens, but the parents maybe are not. And they would qualify for TANF. but their parents don't. And during the recession, Washington added a limit for the kids too. So after 60 months, they were also kicked off very unjustly. So we're hoping to see a bill introduced this year that would remove that cap entirely, because just like grownups, kids should be able to get help when they need help. Yeah, can't believe you have to say that, but it's true. The other thing that we're excited to see this year, there is a cash assistance program for adults with disabilities called Aged Blind Disabled, or ABD. And the big takeaway here is that we all deserve to have what we need to survive and live healthy lives. So the amount that is associated with ABD is $197 per person per month. So that's less than $200 per month. It hasn't been raised in a really long time. And there is a budget proviso this year that would more than double it and make it $417 per month per person. So that's still not enough, but that would be a huge increase and make a huge difference. So excited to help support that. Okay, last one. This is an exciting other category too. So this is those innovative poverty reduction strategies that we were talking about that help get cash into people's pockets. So one of the key message here is that we are each the experts in our own lives, and we know how to meet our basic needs better than anyone else. So we don't need a program that says you can only spend it on this, or you can only use these dollars for this category. No, we think that if folks have cash in their own pockets, like, we know how to spend money to best support ourselves and our lives and our families. So these programs would support that. The first one is a guaranteed basic income pilot that Representative Berry is sponsoring, House Bill 2009. And so she would be, that would be moving forward, and yeah, excited to see something innovative like that and see where it goes this session. There's also something called the Washington Futures Fund, which would be like if you've heard of like a baby bonds program, it would start an investment account for each Washingtonian born under Apple Health. That would be about $3,000 when they're born, and then it would grow until you're 18, and then you can take money out at that point. So that's also exciting to see. That one is going to be supported by the Office of the State Treasurer. And the last one is last year we were able to pass the Working Families Tax Credit and finally fund it. And this year there's just some technical fixes that need to go through so that we can actually implement it and actually get that cash into people's pockets in the way that it's supposed to go. So yeah, these are the big ideas that we're excited about. And yep, that's basic needs for this session. Now I'll hand it to Omar, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Omar's going to join us and talk a little bit about our dental therapy priorities.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I almost said good afternoon. Sorry, it's been a long morning. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Before I jump in and talk about our access to dental care, I just wanted to take a few minutes to not only thank all of you for being here, but also I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't thank all my amazing core team that helped put this event together. You know, we started working on this back in early September and have just been plodding away these last couple months. So if we can take a few minutes in the chat or with your reactions to show some love for Karina, Sydney, and Abby, who were my wonderful co-planners on this amazing project. They're the ones who helped put this event together. So let's hear some love for them. All right, on to expanding access to dental care. So really the key message here is that, you know, we all deserve to have a healthy smile, no matter where we live, no matter what our race is, what insurance we can or can't afford. You know, we all need access to accessible and affordable dental care. And, you know, and that was one thing that we heard loud and clear in our listening session of folks' experiences trying to access care, having to travel far distances just to see a dentist that would either accept the insurance that they have or to find a sliding scale dentist. So, that's definitely something that we've been pushing for. So the first one that we wanted to highlight is, maintaining investments made to the Medicaid adult dental program. In 2021, the legislature made some significant investments to the Medicaid dental program. They not only included $76 million to ensure that more Washingtonians were able to see a dentist, but to also provide more funding for the services that are available. But then they also made investments to the children's program so that there were more dentists available who would be interested in reaching out and having Medicaid, to use Medicaid so that more patients would be able to get services there. So we want to make sure that we protect those investments and continue to encourage the legislature to push for some of those investments. Now, the second one is around supporting House Bill 1885, sponsored by Representative Eileen Cody from the 34th Legislative District. This is something that we've been working on for a number of years, but it would allow dental therapists to practice in the state of Washington. Currently, dental therapists are able to practice on tribal lands across Washington state, and we've seen some really great successes in tribal communities. And we want to make sure that all Washingtonians are able to access that as well. So this would help expand it statewide. Last year, the legislature was able to provide us funding to establish the Dental Therapy Task Force, of which we were one of the members in that task force, and ensure that, apologies, my chat is blowing up. And we're ensuring that, sorry, let's look at that. Yes, the task force. So the task force looked at the current model of dental therapy that was being practiced on tribal land and figure out a way to expand it statewide. So this House Bill 1885 would take the recommendations that were found in the task force, particularly recommendations A and C, and push forth a pathway to expand dental therapy. Also, I just want to say that we expect to have a hearing next week on the bill, which we're pretty excited about. We'll probably send out more communications, and we hope that you can help support dental therapy as it makes its way through the legislative session. Thank you so much, and I will hand it over to Finica. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. Actually, quickly before you head off, there was a quick question in the chat. If you could just say a little bit more about what a dental therapist is.
That's a great question. Yeah. So a dental therapist, think about them as the physician assistant or the nurse practitioner, but in the dental team. So they are considered a mid-level provider, something between a dentist, but not quite a hygienist. So they're able to do some of the procedures that each of those other professions can do. But also the goal of it is to provide more culturally responsive care. The goal of a dental therapist is to have somebody from the community be able to go through that training and be able to stay in the community and practice, so that they know the community, they know the culture, they know the language. And that's one of the positive experiences that we've seen about dental therapists practicing on tribal lands, is that there's that familiarity and that rapport. Being able to provide not only preventative services, but also education around how to have a healthy smile and how to maintain that healthy smile. So hopefully that is able to provide a little bit more information about what a dental therapist is. So great question, whoever asked it in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Omar. We're going to turn it over to Sean to chat about our priorities for safety and civil rights, removing barriers to incarceration and consumer protections.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Finica. So I want to take a second to start maybe by summarizing an issue that we have really been tracking quite a bit, over the last year, and thinking about how it was exactly that Poverty Action could get involved in the conversation and in the movement that was taking place around police accountability, everywhere in the country, certainly in Seattle. Civil asset forfeiture is an issue that some folks might on this call be familiar with. we're more prone to use the phrase police seizure or property seizure in talking about this, just to make sure that the issue is not euthanized and people understand exactly what it is that we're talking about. Civil asset forfeiture being a practice where police are really just allowed to take the belongings of, often is not innocent folks, often is not folks who have been charged with low-level nonviolent crimes. You often see, for example, protesters who are going out to, exercise their constitutional right to talk about the need for civil rights in this city and in this country, say that they want to leave their phones behind because they know that if they happen to get stopped or arrested, police will have a right to sort of seize those phones, make it so that people have to go through a very lengthy legal process to get them back. And we see that for small amounts of property, but also a former police chief by the name of Norm Stamper highlighted this as an issue that impacted a lot of immigrant communities in specific. Everything from cars to real estate to real property, consumer electronics. Police have the ability to seize those in the name of fighting a so-called war on drugs, which if you've read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, has been revealed to be very much a war on Black and brown and certainly poor people. So this is a practice that exists in Washington state, okay? And not only does it exist here, but we also have some of the worst laws around this practice in the country. The Center Policing for Profit indicated in 2020, I believe it was, that Washington state got a D- for its asset forfeiture laws, citing the fact that in the state of Washington, you don't have to be convicted of a crime to have your assets seized. And also 90% of the value of assets seized is returned to police departments. So it creates a policing for profit incentive that we are very interested at Poverty Action in trying to see if we can break that feedback loop. There will likely, I should say, not be a bill about this issue in this present legislative session. There's a lot of groundwork that needs to get done, a lot of community building, a lot of outreach that we want to do to make sure that when we're actually able to take action on this issue, hopefully next legislative session, it's going to be a bill that's as thorough and comprehensive as possible. But it is something that we are still tracking. It's a conversation that is happening among lawmakers, certainly, especially in the Public Safety Committee in the State House. So we are really excited to be, educating people about this issue and sort of ramping up to making sure that we have a legislative fix for it in the coming legislative session. So looking forward to 2023 as we move to the next slide. So, touched on this a little bit on the previous slide in talking about civil asset forfeiture, but if you know anything about mass incarceration, you know what a tremendous burden it has been on communities of color and poor folks the country over, in a country that has the largest prison population many times over in the world. You're talking about people that are in essence disappeared, and when they get back into society are often is not facing many of the same hurdles that they had before they were incarcerated. So one of the things that we're excited about here is at Poverty Action is removing some of those barriers to what's called re-entry, right? Making it so that if folks want to exercise their voting rights, if folks have legal and financial obligations that are sort of hovering over them and making it harder for them to reach their goals and aspirations, we want to alleviate, if not eliminate, those completely. And so that's one of the reasons why we're so happy to be working with Representative Tara Simmons in supporting House Bill 1412, which is a bill that would eliminate mandatory fines and fees for sentencing and would also expand who qualifies for waived interest so that there are fewer people who are ensnared by sort of a lot of the fines and legal financial obligations, when they get out after being incarcerated. We oftentimes, I think, have a see no evil approach to policy concerns, especially when it comes to mass incarceration, that if it's not an issue that we don't have an immediate familial connection to, or if you have millions of people that are sort of hidden away from plain view, we think that the issues that they might be confronting are ones that we don't have to grapple with. But That's absolutely not the case. We have to make sure that we have a state and a society laws on the books that make it so that we're going in the direction of inclusivity and not excluding folks and making folks pay, in essence, 2 times over, once by having been incarcerated and the second time by not being able to re-enter society as well. As we move to the next slide. So we have also been, I mean, if consumer protections really sort of forms in many ways a bread and butter and core issue in our sort of legislative focus here at Poverty Action. And one of the bills that we have been looking at and really doing everything that we can to make sure it doesn't go too far is Senate Bill 5623, which is a bill that would prevent repealing the current ban on insurance companies who use credit to calculate insurance rates. There was a point in time where we had in this state a arrangement whereby if you had a perfect driving record, but a credit score that was under construction, let's say, you would be paying higher insurance rates and premiums than somebody who had a spottier driving record, but was a little bit more affluent or had a good credit score. It doesn't make sense. Many observers of this practice have justifiably called it a form of 21st century redlining in a lot of ways, where being born into poverty or struggling into poverty follows you wherever you go, including in places where it really doesn't make that much sense at all, which is in most places actually. And so making sure that we uphold this ban by opposing Senate Bill 5623. Coincidentally, you will see a lot of folks that will stand up in favor of this bill on certain grounds, trying to say that it's an equity issue in reverse, making sure that seniors don't pay higher insurance rates, when we don't really buy a lot of that argument or pay too much stock in it, in understanding that the state of California, for instance, has upheld this practice and insurance companies are certainly profitable there. And here in Washington state, insurance companies are profitable enough to actually make large campaign contributions to some of the elected officials that are going to be trying to prop up 5623. So we have what's been called a full court press to make sure that we don't have 5623 get passed, and playing defense on the one side and playing offense on the other with respect to consumer protections, and wanting to see House Bill 1616, which is another piece of legislation from Representative Simmons's office that would provide access to hospital care for over 2.2 million lower income Washingtonians, and ensuring that people who make less than 300% of the poverty level can receive care without any out-of-pocket expenses. The bill would also provide discounts to folks who make up to 400% of the poverty level. So these are some of the bills that we've been paying attention to, some of them that we're very excited about, others that you can tell we're not very excited about and are going to do a lot to make sure that we can deflate, and some others that we're thinking about not just for this session, but for future sessions as well, and bringing a lot of our coalition partners, especially in the ACLU, the King County's Public Defender's Office as well, and talking about this conversation around police seizure. So I'm going to pass it off here back to Finica.
Thanks, Sean. That was all super informative. And I know there are a lot of folks who are really interested in some of those priorities in the chat. So thanks for sharing. We are going to pass it off to Executive Director Marcy Bowers, who is going to, first of all, take some time for questions. I know we just went over a lot, and so if folks have questions that they had during those overviews, this is a good time to maybe put them in the chat, or maybe raise your hand and we can go through some. And then she's going to walk us through kind of a 101 of how to elevate and discuss our concerns with our lawmakers. So that'll help us prep for our sessions later today, and when you meet with your other district members to start planning on how you'd like to tackle your meetings. So Marcy, would you like to join us?
Okay, thank you, everyone. I was in charge of spotlighting everyone, but I can't figure out how to spotlight myself, which feels like a really classic Zoom moment for everyone. So before we jump into kind of how in the world do we prepare for these meetings, I know there were several of you who who said this was your first time, but I want to give everybody the chance to ask any questions. I hopefully can answer them enough, but if I can't answer them, I will call on my lovely and amazing colleagues to answer any questions. So please feel free to type some in the chat, or you are welcome to raise your hand or come off mute and ask your question. If there is really no questions, I am going to say this is a first for Lobby Day, that there are no questions on the policy agenda. Oh, okay, here we go. Is there a way for, let's see, is there a way for legislators to support a bill other than voting for it when it finally comes up for a vote? For example, is there a co-sponsorship? Yes, 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 and yes. Thank you, Beth, for the question. So legislators can, early on in session, legislators can co-sponsor bills, or they can sponsor the bills. So, you know, at this point, most bills have been released and gotten ready for their hearings, or dropped, as the lingo goes. So if you hear anybody say the bill dropped, that means that it's ready to be considered by other members of the legislatures. So that's one piece of it. If a legislator is in the committee, so they can co-sponsor when the bill first drops. If they are on a committee that is hearing the bill, that's an opportunity to advocate to your legislators about whether they should vote for the bill in committee. So that's one place where they can be involved. And that's in both the policy committee as well as in the fiscal committee. So the fiscal committees are the ones that decide whether the policy is worth the cost that it will be to the state. And so that's a very powerful committee. A lot of bills live and die by those fiscal committees. So that's a really good opportunity if a legislator is on one of those committees to keep a bill alive and moving, or a place to squash a bill that you don't like. So yes, there's also opportunities to advocate for it as it comes to the floor. So that's another thing that legislators can do. So there's all sorts of ways for them to be involved along the way. And you can ask them to do any of those things. You know, and even if they're not on the right committee, there's an opportunity for you to say to them, like, I would like you to support this bill in your conversation with fellow lawmakers. So I want you to own this as a priority as well. And I want you, even though you're not on the right committees, can you talk to your colleagues about how important it is for this, that this bill like keeps moving? So great question, Beth. Okay, so the working families tax credit not funded yet. The slide looked like it's approved but not funded. It is funded. So apologies if we worded that wrong, like weirdly on the slide. That was part of the big deal last year when it passed after 13 years. So it was, the structure of the credit was updated a little bit, and it was fully funded. And I'm thrilled to report that it was funded through the general budget. So it's not dependent on some random bucket of money that is sometimes available and sometimes not. It is just now part of the state's operating budget, and it will go into effect in 2023 for the tax year of 2022. So if you're not a regular tax filer, 2022 is your year to start filing your taxes so you can get access to the Working Families Tax Credit. Okay, let's see here. Sean, get ready. There's a police seizure question. Great to see that can be, police seizure of property. Great to see that it can be ended on a statewide level instead of having to fight it in every city. Absolutely. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, that's exactly the point of it. I think so many of the measures that we have seen with respect to police accountability have happened in a piecemeal fashion. Though it has been a national conversation, it's a conversation that I think has left a lot of organizers and advocates sort of estranged from one another on a city by city level. So when that bill does come together, I think that what you're going to end up seeing is a lot of folks who have felt like maybe they have been pushing on this issue at the municipal level in a silo, knowing and understanding that there's going to be action, you know, on this at the state level. And I think that's going to be tremendously galvanizing for a lot of folks, not just on this issue, but many others with respect to police accountability. Just wanted to take a second to answer one question aloud that was sent to me in a direct message here, right here on Zoom. There's not presently going to be a bill about this in the 2022 session, but the conversations have begun with lawmakers about the issue, so that I think we're feeling pretty optimistic that we'll be able to get something out about this in 2023. So yeah, thanks for everybody who's expressed interest about it and shared stories about it or perspective about it here in the chat as well.
Thank you, Sean. And you can still, even if there's not an active bill, if this is something that impacts you, you can absolutely still mention it to lawmakers as a thing that you hope that they will start working on soon. Part of our thought this year, and the reason we included it, is even if there's not an active bill, we want lawmakers to understand that this is an issue impacting their constituents, and that you have the and that they know, so that they can start working on it and thinking about it and get ready to sponsor one of those bills like Beth asked about.
Marcy, there was a question earlier about how folks can get more information about the bills being discussed.
Well, so there's a few things. Every bill has a legislative page on the legislative website. Now, I want to be real honest with you that the legislative website is a bit wonky, okay? It is meant for lawmakers and policy wonks, but it does have a lot of good information on it, and you can see how the bills are progressing. So if you go to the legislative website, which is leg.wa.gov, on the left toolbar, there is a bill information link. You can click on that, and there's a place where you can enter the bill number. So all of the bill numbers that we included through our presentation, they each have their own page. And you can see who sponsored the bill. You can see where it's at in the process. And let me give you one of my favorite tips about the legislative website. So you can read the bill itself, the really technical kind of legalese bill, if you kind of scroll down below the process. But then if a bill is getting a hearing, there's a really awesome link that's called the bill report. And that bill report is the legislative staff giving a summary of the bill. So it changes throughout the course of session, where they add like who came and testified, what were their concerns. It kind of gives a summary of everything, and it's still fairly technical language, but it is not bill draft legal writing. So it's one of my favorite resources on the legislative website to get like kind of a sense of like a little bit more technical information, but without having to be a lawyer to understand it. And then of course, all of us, like we are always happy to answer any of your questions. We're just an email away. Please feel free to reach out to any of us at any point, and we can help you kind of navigate the process.
It looks like, if someone could drop the link to that in there, that'd be great. Ask Liz. And then there are some questions about the logistics of lawmaker meetings with Zoom today. So how long are the meetings with lawmakers? Is there one meeting per district or multiple? And maybe speaking a little bit more about how this afternoon's going to look.
Well, I don't want to steal my own thunder by telling you too much about how it's going to go, but I will tell you that legislative meetings during the legislative session are typically about 15 minutes long. During the rest of the year, sometimes they'll give you half an hour to an hour even. But during session, kind of best case scenario is that you get 15 minutes with a legislator. That said, some legislators, it's kind of different depending on the district. Some legislators really like to combine and say like, we're gonna meet together with members of our district. And other legislators aren't able to work that into their schedule. So it just sort of depends. But they all are probably 15 minutes unless Leanna comes off mute and tells us that something is different about them. Nope, okay. And sometimes they're combined and sometimes they're not. Most are not. By and large, they are not combined, but it's possible that they could be at some point today. And we will walk through kind of the anatomy of having a successful meeting, including a role play. So this is your cue, role players, to get ready.
I think the last kind of policy related questions in the chat were around, I think you talked about that working families tax credit passed, but maybe there's still a little confusion about what the advocacy piece is this year. And then will any of the bills proposed raise property taxes?
Good question. So on the working families tax credit, so the credit itself was fully funded last year. there are two things that we're looking at for this year. One is that we are looking for funding for implementation and outreach to make sure that people actually know about the credit and can access the credit. So I think part of what's so exciting about the Working Families Tax Credit is that it's essentially an earned income tax credit. And we're the first state in the country without an income tax to implement essentially an earned income tax credit. So there's two things that are happening. One is what we're calling the implementation fix. And that's really about doing some work to align. It's really wonky. Doing some work to align the federal EITC with the state's Working Families Tax Credit. Just trust me that that's what's happening, to sort of eliminate a cliff at the end. There's some kind of technical stuff there. But the other one is really about getting enough money to make sure that the state can make it as automatic as possible for people, to limit the just another time that people with low incomes have to share their personal story and tell all about their finances, to make it as automatic as possible and as accessible as possible. So that requires getting it right the first time we go up, instead of building a system that isn't that helpful for folks. And then the other piece is, we know that there are some communities and families that are less likely to access government systems and programs. And we want to make sure that we have the outreach money available to community partners to be able to help get the word out so that people can access the credit and know about it. Sean, I see your hand up. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the spirit of the question is sort of getting at a bit of the unfairness of Washington State's economic system generally, and our tax code generally, for sure. And just reiterating that at Poverty Action Network, we are really, really committed to working in coalition to find progressive sources of revenue. Those are sources of revenue that don't, in essence, balance the state's checkbook on the backs of, working class homeowners, on the backs of sales taxes and things of that nature. We're proud to be working in coalition with the folks that balance our tax code to do just that, to really leave no stone unturned in searching for forms of revenue that will come more from affluent individuals and some of the large corporations that we have here in Washington State, as opposed to from working people who have, and a lot of lower income homeowners who have been really struggling under the weight of raised property taxes, and that being an accelerator of displacement. So just wanted to sort of reiterate that is something that we've been tracking a lot, and certainly working working towards over the last few years.
Thanks, John and Marcy. There were a couple of questions around the hospital out-of-pocket expenses bill, and if you've seen any opposition from that so far, or if folks can expect any. And then, is there a bill number for maintaining investments made to the Medicaid dental program?
Sure. So on the out-of-pocket expenses, I have not seen any opposition to it. That doesn't mean it's not coming. And Chris, I think, perhaps the Hospital Association, I don't want to say that they're opposed if they're not. So just know that's likely, I assume, where that would come from. But I have not seen any opposition to that at this point. And then we do not need a bill to protect and maintain Medicaid adult dental rates. So that is done through the budget. And we will not need a bill for that. So we just have to make sure that it stays in the budget as is, or that it adds. There's an effort to increase the children's Medicaid reimbursement rates for dental, and that also can happen via budget proviso. And Christina, since I'm talking, I'm happy to just take Christina's question. I don't need to turn it back to you, Finika.
Hi, Marcy. I have a question.
Christina.
So, hi. Usually, like when we've gone to lobby day and stuff in the past, this is my first time virtual. You always give like a packet of information or like papers describing what you're there for, also for them to look over later. Since we are virtual, how does that work now?
Great question. So two things. So on the legislative website, I'm guessing somebody is going to drop a link in a chat in just a second. Sydney put together a fact sheet page. So kudos, let me pause for just a second and give a public shout out and kudos to Sydney, who's our communications manager, who has done an incredible amount of work over the last couple weeks to get our policy agenda up, to get a bunch of fact sheets ready, to make this beautiful PowerPoint. She made these beautiful backgrounds. So Sydney's done a ton of work. Let me give her a public shout out. And so what she just put in the chat, there's a whole page with fact sheet links so that you can include those. So those are all available for you on our website. And then I think the other thing that you all should know is that this morning, well, I didn't write it this morning, I said it to go out this morning. This morning I emailed the entire legislature, our policy agenda, and all of our fact sheets, and made a note that their constituents might be referencing them during their meetings today. So they have all received those messages in their inboxes this morning, but you can also feel free to pull from the website. Okay, any other questions before we jump into the, how do we do this thing? Like, how do we actually have these lawmaker meetings? Okay, actually, this is a great question. I'm going to take this question from Beth in the chat. So do legislators typically say something for poor people would be nice, but Washington State can't afford it? Should we be prepared to talk about how Washington could increase revenue or reallocate spending? So the short answer, unfortunately, is yes. This is a thing that people talk about frequently, like, well, we'd love to do that, but we can't really afford it. So this year is a little bit funky, though. This year, there's still over $1 billion in federal COVID relief dollars that the state can utilize. So I should note that that's not ongoing. That won't happen forever. But they do have money that they can work with. Legislators do have money that they can work with this legislative session. And similarly, state revenue is actually in a great spot right now. There was a budget surplus during the last kind of budget checkpoint. There's something called a revenue forecast that happens every quarter. And that's just really like the state's time to sort of look at, do we have enough revenue? Are we ahead? Are we behind? And we're ahead of schedule, sort of ahead of what we expect with the state budget. So, you know, candidly, it would be really hard for me to keep a straight face with the legislator if they said, oh, we just don't have any money, because the truth is there's like $1.5 billion in budget surplus right now. That's billion with a B. Okay. So, you know, legislators have the opportunity to do it, but I think it's also really important to know, like, you know what, this is about doing the big picture, long-term work that's needed to truly address poverty in our state. And that's not something that we can just kind of nibble around the edges on spending for. Like, that takes a bold set of investments. And it's time to do that. The time is now. We've gone through so much over the last few years together, and the time is now. So it's a great question. And do your best to keep a straight face with legislators if they tell you there's no money, but there's money. Okay. Is somebody able to answer Tracy in the chat? I feel like now I've opened up the can of worms for everyone. Please keep your questions coming. We're happy to talk through them, but I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to tell you all about how to do this. Plus, I have some awesome volunteers ready to help with a skit. So Juanita, Anthony, Jackie, and Samantha, can you all confirm that you are here? Maybe just drop something in the chat, because I can't see all of you right now. Okay, well, and I saw Juanita a second ago. Okay, so here we are. So my name is Marcy. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you all here. We have reached the part of the morning where we get some details on what to do this afternoon. So there are definitely people who have done this before. There's also a lot of first timers, as we talked about. So I'm going to ask our panelists actually to come off mute and share one piece of advice that they've learned over the years from doing these sort of meetings. And I also encourage anyone who's done this before to add any tips or advice into the chat. So Juanita and Anthony, do you want to go first?
Sure.
I think doing this all these years just makes me stronger and aware of more things that I can use my voice to make a change. Okay. What have you learned all these years of doing this with me?
It's fun to speak in front of a lot of people. That's pretty much what I learned.
Excellent. All right, Samantha, what about you? Do you have a piece of advice?
Yeah, I've learned that lawmakers really like to hear personal stories and hear from their constituents, and they often will say, like, I didn't know this. I didn't know that this was a huge issue, and that they are generally appear grateful to hear from us and hear our stories, and that they are just people too.
Excellent advice. Jackie, how about you?
I would riff off what Samantha just said, and just further say, like, these people are individuals, and not to let the sense of like power that they have make your advocacy less important. Like, what we have to say is very important, and it deserves to be heard, so keep strong.
Awesome, thank you. There's some good ones coming up in the chat around managing your time so that people could share their personal stories, sending thank you notes, centering stories. Sarah Jane boldly said our legislators are nice, which is most of them by and large are quite nice. Trying to develop ongoing communications. Legislators like to have these personal stories so they can share them with other members of the legislature and encourage people. So that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where we said, even if they're not on the right committees, before the vote, they can encourage their colleagues to support particular legislation. So great suggestions. Feel free to keep them coming in the chat if you think of some as we go. So here's what we're going to do. This is the part where Zoom has to fully cooperate with everybody, and we are going to do a little bit of, we're going to screen share the PowerPoint, and then we're going to come off the screen share and watch the role play, and then we're going to kind of go back and forth. So this is always sort of an adventure in Zoom land. You'd think after all this time we'd have it totally dialed in, and we might, but I just feel like I need to prepare everyone. So how do you know where your meeting is, and how do you get the Zoom link? So on the website, the Poverty Action /Lobby Day 2022, there's a full listing of all appointments and links in case you can't easily find the email that maybe came to you, although I don't think we emailed them out this year. I think we decided to put them on the website. So several meetings have a passcode, and that number should also be on the spreadsheet. So please read the notes section for any special instructions from lawmakers. Things seem like they're a lot easier this year. It sounds like Leanna didn't have to do quite as much work. I mean, she did plenty of work, do quite as much work tracking down passcodes, et cetera, from lawmakers as she did last year, now that we've had a whole year of Zoom under our belts in the legislature. So, but please do check the notes. So your lawmaker meetings will take place alongside all of the other people from your district who are joining us today. So some districts have just 2 or 3 people, and some have like 20. So just a reminder, big groups can be powerful because they show lawmakers how much support there is for the issues that you care about, but it can also take some coordination to make sure that you get your points across. So as we talked about earlier, most meetings are only 15 minutes long, so it's important to be well prepared. So, okay, planning for your meeting. Here we are. Okay, so the first thing I want to really flag here, so yes, make a plan that all members of your group agree on and assign roles. When possible, speak from experience. So this is the part I really want to talk about. So here at Poverty Action, we believe that we are strongest when we center the voices and perspectives of those impacted by poverty and racism. So when you head to the breakout rooms, they're sorted by your district. To plan your lawmaker meetings, think about yourself and your community in terms of your relationship to the policy issues that we discussed today. If you have personal experience with this issues, we encourage you to take a deep breath and speak up and play a leadership role in helping your lawmaker understand the issue. But if you don't have personal experience, we encourage you to work with your group to figure out how best to support and amplify the voices of those most impacted. So the bigger groups today hopefully have district leaders that will help you prepare for group meetings, and the district leaders will be in the breakout rooms with you to help you prepare. Okay, so to help you prepare for your lawmaker meeting, we have a resource guide called Know Your Role that was mailed in your packets, is on the website, and was emailed to you. It outlines the different roles that people can play in a lawmaker meeting. So here we go with the script. So the first slide is, I'm sorry, not the first slide, it is the first slide, but the first part of the lawmaker meeting is the introduction. So you want to start the meeting with a brief round of introductions. If you represent an organization, you can share that, introduce yourself, tell your elected official or the staff person about your organization, where it's located. If you're not with an org, you can just talk about being members of the district. So here is a quick example of that. So here we go. Anthony, you're on.
Welcome. It's great to see so many faces from the district. I hope meeting via Zoom made it easier for you today. What were you hoping to discuss today?
Thank you for your time, Representative Nguyen. My name is Juanita, and I am a constituent from your district. And I am here with Jackie and Samantha. We are here with Statewide Poverty Action Network's Lobby Day. I can't read today.
That's okay, that's okay. So we're gonna pause the skit. So come on back with the slides. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is name the issue. So we want to state clearly and briefly the issue you want to discuss, what your position is, and what action you want your elected official to take. So offer a few supporting facts about why they take your position. So let's see that in action. Samantha.
Oh, sorry, none of the buttons were working. Representative Nguyen, we are here today to talk with you about the exciting opportunity to have a statewide guaranteed basic income in our state. We believe that people know their own needs the best, and direct cash assistance is a good way to give meaningful assistance to people living on low income from a place of trust and dignity. This session, Representative Berry of the 36th District is working on a bill that would create a 3-year-long guaranteed basic income pilot program. People with low income would be able to receive a monthly payment that could help them pay their rent and support their families.
Okay, pause again. So you can see how Samantha did a fantastic job highlighting the issue for lawmakers. She didn't need to be an expert on the issue. She just needed to name the issue clearly so that a lawmaker would know what specific proposal we're talking about. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is share a personal story. It's probably the most important. I think I say on 2 slides that it's the most important part of the meeting, but I think there's really 2 most important parts. So this is really going to help the lawmaker know the issue and how it will impact people in their district. So let's see this in action. Jackie, take it away.
Representative Nguyen, I want you to know why we feel so strongly about this issue. I'm a mother of 2 kids, 5 and 3, and as I work as much as I can as a retail worker right here in our district, the past 2 years have been really hard and my work has been inconsistent. But even before that, I struggled to get by on my wages. My hours are really inconsistent. We qualify for and use some of the programs like SNAP, but applying for programs is challenging sometimes. I feel like I have to spend a lot of time telling my story and proving my need. It sometimes feels like another job just to apply for benefits. My family really benefited from credit payments we got this summer and fall, That was critical to helping us have stability when my work was slow, and it helped us pay for unexpected expenses, like when my car broke down again. I would love it if Washington State would try doing something like these programs and these payments. It was so nice just to feel trusted to spend money on the things I knew my family needed for a change. When I heard that there was going to be a bill on GIB this session, I knew I had to come and tell you how it would help my family.
Okay, pause again. That was a great example of making an issue personal. We don't want to just state facts and figures. We want lawmakers to know that the policy will have a tangible impact on lives and those of our loved ones. I really like how Jackie shared that she knew it would work and why she knew it would work by tying it to the child tax credit payments that we had recently over the course of the summer. So this makes the experience really human and relatable. Okay, so here we are. This is the make and ask. This, I think, is the other slide that I always say is the most important slide. So it's also very important. This is about making the transition from the personal story to making an ask. And I want to acknowledge, Juanita actually teases me about this all the time, that sometimes this part of the meeting is literally the most intimidating part. But it is really important, because if we are not clear about what we want lawmakers to do with our stories and our information, then they get to decide. And that's not what we're after. We're after them. We are after being advocates for our own stories and our experiences and these particular policies. So it's our job as constituents to make requests of our lawmakers to ensure that they're representing us in the legislature. So let's take a look at that example. Oh, Juanita, you're still muted.
I do not feel coordinated today. This issue is a top priority for us. Representative Wynn, like Jackie said, all of us are struggling to make ends meet and doing the best we can to stay housed and feed our families. This issue would have a big impact on all of our lives and many other people's in our district. Can we count on your support of a statewide guaranteed basic income?
Okay, let's pause that again. That was a great ask from Juanita. It was clear and direct, and it was something that a lawmaker could say yes or no to. So let's see how Representative Wynn responds. Representative Wynn, also known as Anthony.
Would be a big help in our district. Though it seems like it would cost the state a lot of money, how do we know that this would be truly helpful to families?
Could y'all hear that? It's breaking up a little bit. Anthony, can I have you do that one more time?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Come a little closer so we can see you and hear you.
Well, it sounds like an exciting proposal and something that could be a big help to people in our district. I am not sure, though. It seems like it would cost the state a lot of money. How do we know that this would be truly helpful to families?
All right, so let's pause there. So it sounds like the representative needs a little more information to help make his decision. Sometimes they might request a little more information. So there's a make an ask part two. See, you'll notice a trend here. I'm always going to tell you to make an ask. So it can be good to be ready for the type, for whatever type of response you get. So be prepared for however you think your lawmaker, or for however your lawmaker will respond. Sometimes they surprise you. So have a plan to turn a yes into a champion and undecided into a yes, and to learn from the objections of a no. I cannot promise you that all legislators are going to say yes to all of our ideas. So if it's a yes, you can ask a follow-up question that's like, how will you work to elevate this issue among other members of the legislature? If somebody's undecided, what additional information would you need from us to help support the bill? And if it's a no, you can say, we really want to emphasize how important this issue is to our community because of all the things we just told you. Is there anything that might change your mind about this issue? So we can sort of learn a little bit more about why somebody might not support something yet, and we can work accordingly. So let's see that in action.
That is a great question, Representative Wynn. We have a fact sheet for you that tells you more about the proposal. I will send it to you right after this meeting. As you will see, Guaranteed Basic Income, or GBI, has the opportunity to be truly transformational to our families and communities.
That is very helpful. Thank you for providing me information. For me, this sounds like a really important proposal. Oh, I haven't heard about this yet, and all of you have really helped me understand how this would impact many people living in our district. Well, I would love to keep talking with all of you, but it's time for my next meeting. Thank you all so much for taking this time to meet with me today.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Okay, so let's take a moment. Everybody give a little reaction to our volunteers. Round of applause. Thank you.
Awesome job.
Amazing. Okay, so as I noted earlier, in the past, when we were all in person, you might have handed a legislator a fact sheet, but this year everything is via email. So it's okay to send them the fact sheet after the meeting. You don't have to have everything in front of you or to them before or during the meeting. In fact, sometimes I actually like to send it out later on purpose, just to give them sort of another opportunity to have them reminded. So sort of like, it's like 2 touches in this. So we're going to head out to breakout rooms shortly with our district groups. If you haven't already, please rename yourself on Zoom with your legislative district and your name. So, your name, like sort of an example is mine, your name, your pronouns. Actually, don't use mine as example because it says staff. And then your legislative district, mine would say the 43rd, soon to be the 46th because of redistricting. If you do not see your district on the breakout list, it means that your district group is very small and it might just be you. So you'll be in the main room working with staff on planning your meetings. If you're not sure about your district or didn't, please take a moment to find your district at the legislative website. If you need help, you can add a message in the chat and we'll get you to the right place. A quick warning that some meetings are very close together and others are spread out across the afternoon. So please double check on the times of your meetings and give yourself time to switch between meetings, or be sure that you come back on time if there's a long break. So I will note that if you're in the 46th legislative district, your meetings are 3 in a row, back to back to back. So please plan accordingly, like maybe take your bathroom break before that meeting, get yourself some water, and get ready to just go like straight through. Everyone's meetings will be between 12:30 and 4:30. And I am going to turn it back over to you, Finica. Thank you all so much and great job, role players.
Thanks, Marcy. That was super helpful. And I think before we break out into our breakout rooms, thanks everyone for, again, renaming your selves with your district so we all know what breakout rooms to send you to. But before we do that, we have one last special treat for you all to help us ground and give us some inspiration before we chat with our lawmakers. We'll have a spoken word performance by Dr. Ben Yisrael of the Seattle Alchemy Poetry Series and with the Healthy King County Coalition. Ben is an artist, writer, and awarded performance poet. He's a founder and curator at Alchemy Poetry Series in Seattle. And he's also an organizer and community builder who earned a PhD in political science from Texas A&M University. In Seattle and King County, he works on a number of issues ranging from health equity, drug policy, food justice, and city planning. So Ben, I think you're on the call. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And I hear you have some words for us.
Yeah, how are you all? I'm thankful to be invited here and want to share thoughts and poetry on this day where we recognize MLK. I think it's really positive that we continue to honor his legacy, but I also think it's important that we recognize that there's still a ways to go. And the poem that I'm about to read is called Trigger Warning, and it kind of discusses that that struggle. Can y'all hear me good? Cool. If you believed the election of Barack Obama ended systemic racism, ushered in post-racial equality, think the real issue is class, or advertise how many people of color you know as evidence that you're progressive, please consider this your re-education. Even when we are not being bludgeoned with billy clubs and bombs, they are playing Mockingbird and launching questions like weapons. You know, your people could achieve more without rioting. Of course, your lives matter, but could you protest peacefully, suffer quietly? April 4th, 1968, America, massacres, the Peace Prize winner in Memphis, because profits of peace are dangerous to the profit line of capitalism. They ask, why don't you just build your own community? Stop seeking handouts and kickstart your own economy. Remind them of how they built bonfires from our bones. May 31st, 1921, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma was bombed to ash. Fact. 9/11 was not the first time airplanes were used to terrorize US citizens. Fact. White supremacy was our Al-Qaeda, destroying 191 businesses, 1,265 homes, and over 300 lives. They will say, if you have so many problems with this country, why don't you just go back to Africa? As if their ancestors didn't bring us here by force. As if the Honorable Marcus Garvey didn't build a movement to establish ties with a mother continent, only to be sabotaged by Judeo-Christian supremacy and the US government. Because ultimately, some prefer us in captivity and don't want us to leave, and they don't care when we tell them that we can't breathe. So, the murders of Eric, Oscar, Laquan, Trayvon, Alton, Phil, Betty, Tamir, Rakia, Sandra, Brianna, and George may or may not be indicted. Because only a thin veil separates the robes of the Supreme Court and the knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Because the original police in this country were slave catchers. So maybe they are just doing their jobs. Because every time they patrol our streets, it feels like the ghost of Jim Crow is riding shotgun. Some say we don't know what happened before those videos. We know damn well what happened. Tuskegee experiments, transatlantic slave trade, force-fed religion, institutionalized rape and lynching, Rosewood, black coats, crack cocaine, and COINTELPRO. The FBI program to destroy Black nationalist movements and prevent the rise of the Messiah. So don't tell us how far we've come. Don't demand that we settle for anything less than salvation. Don't quote Martin Luther King and ask us to lose gracefully. Flint, Michigan, present day. When they cannot kill you with the lead from their bullets, they will put it in the water. That's it. That's a poem I wrote called Trigger Warning.
Ben, thank you so much for sharing your words and your vision and your power today. I think this is a really great reminder of why we're here and how much we still have left to go, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, really appreciate you being here, Ben. You're getting a lot of love in the chat as well, so take a look.
Thank you.
Everyone, I hope that kind of grounds you for your next couple hours and for the rest of the afternoon. And I think we're ready to go back to, there's a slide with some instructions that might help us prepare. Here we go. So we're gonna break out into our legislative district soon. So you can check your lawmaker meeting schedule if you haven't already. There's a link in the
Phoenica, I am so sorry that we did a really bad job telling you something important, which is that Ben has 2 poems for us.
Oh, sorry, Ben. Sorry, Ben.
I'm so sorry, everyone. That is bad notes.
But wait, there's more.
No worries. No worries. So I think I'm going to read one more poem. It's called Savior's Day. And for me, I think it's important. I think King did this, and I think a lot of great leaders throughout time have done this. It's important to educate people on what's going on, which can sometimes be depressing, but I think it's also important to continue to inspire people that we can do better. So this final poem I'm going to read is called Savior's Day. And it really, well, I'll let the words speak for themselves. I was born 7,755 miles from Mecca, 2 continents and a covenant from Bethlehem, and a lifetime of oceans from Jerusalem. I never felt far from God. As I grew older, I was taught about the saviors and prophets who came to redeem us. I bore witness to a world crumbling under the weight of inertia, famines, war, cities falling. And they tell me Christ and Muhammad ascended into heaven. There are 14,000 practicing Jews, 1.5 billion Muslims, 2.1 billion Christians, approximately 4 billion people in the world waiting for a savior. You can spend your entire life in prayer lines asking others to read your palms. Only the illiterate cannot discern the scriptures on their own hands. Wrap salvation in your skin. The Dagara of West Africa initiate their elders, gift them with ceremonial robes. Those most soiled with dirt are viewed as holiest, live like a dust storm. God is on the ground with the failures, dirty needles, burning buildings, and malfunctioning rocket ships. Feed, clothe, build, love, chrysanthemum. Do not shy at the burden of brilliance. Some of us have made a science of self-sabotage. It is always easier to step down than up. Believing someone else will save you is the easy way out. Be yourself. You will not lose your way. You will not drown in it. The diagnosis, the divorce, the layoffs, the miscarriage. You have 4 million pores in your skin. Sweat them out. You have 206 bones, a heart, a brain, a spine. You were built for withstanding. You've got 32 teeth, minus the breakups and the bullies. Roll with the punches. Write the wrongs from the paragraphs you have been sentenced to. The lines on your hands were not meant to remain blank when you are gone. Let them find evidence under your fingernails. Grind. Do it for the lovers and for the loveless, for the ancestors who wanted to go home but didn't have the strength to swim 9,000 miles. Ask them to dance before the music stops and the smile fades to disappointment. Put the beautiful song on repeat. God is on the ground with the failures, dirty needles, burning buildings, and malfunctioning rocket ships. Crosses, rosary beads. Muslims pray 5 times a day. Buddhists meditate. Hindus recognize over 330 million manifestations of the divine. Atheists believe in you. Let your sweat outweigh your ceremony. God is on the ground. All of us are searching. You will not lose your way.
Thank you, Ben. Applause in the chat, virtual applause, snaps. If you have reactions for Ben's words today, please share them with us. Ben, sorry again for cutting you off a little earlier than you were hoping, but if you want to share a little bit more about some of your work or maybe with the Housekeeping County Coalition, I think these are great folks to also share that message with.
Yeah, no, thanks. So Housekeeping County Coalition has been around for about 11 years. It's a coalition of about 40 organizations in Seattle and King County that do health equity work. Those organizations range from organizations that are community-based, that are doing testing for diabetes, high blood pressure, breast cancer, to some larger organizations that we partner with, like Public Health, Kaiser Permanente, Seattle Children's. Some of the prominent organizations from the community that make up our coalition are Center for Multicultural Health, which is a organization that primarily serves African American and African-born constituents. We have APICAT, which is Asian and Pacific Islanders Against Tobacco, Gay City, Neighborhood House. So we've got a variety of organizations in our coalition, and they're all really fighting for health equity and doing that through advocacy and education and testing in our communities. And as we know, looking at, we're in our second year, going on third year in COVID, that when it comes to deaths and when it comes to serious illnesses, that communities of color are still heavily impacted by this crisis. But even before COVID, right, what we saw is disparities in access to food, access to transportation, access to healthcare, access to testing. And these inequities, make everything else more difficult. Everything is connected. Education, income, right? People who have lower incomes have less access to healthcare. So, when we're talking about fighting systemic injustice, this is what, Dr. King and the civil rights movement has always been about. Obviously, issues that we see like police brutality, injustice in education are very prominent issues. But to be frank with you, the health issues that impact communities of color, lead to more death and more poverty than any other issues that we really see. And so health equity is a civil rights issue, and it's something that I'm really concerned with, having lost so many people in my community to high blood pressure, diabetes, and a lot of these other preventable diseases that could be a lot better if we had more health equity. And again, part of the disparities when we see communities of color suffering from COVID is also exacerbated by the existing health inequities that we've seen throughout the years.
Thank you, Ben. If folks would like to learn more about Healthy King County Coalition's work, I dropped the link in the chat, and there's also more about Ben and his work and his poetry at his website and the link there. Ben, thank you again so much for sharing your words and for doing all the work you do in our community and being a light. So hope you're taking care.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you all.
Okay, and with that, I think now we are ready to prep for our meeting. So I think in just a bit, you'll get an automatic invite to a Zoom breakout room with other folks who are in your legislative district, so you can start to prepare, start to use those roll sheets and figure out who wants to say what part of the meeting. Again, if you don't get an invite to a breakout room, just hang tight in the main room and stay put. And I think you'll be preparing with some of Poverty Action staff. And folks, are there anything else to add before? I think people should be getting invites about now. If you have any questions for staff, they're always here. So just shoot us a message.
Before we all leave for our breakout rooms, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone. And we hope you had as much fun as we did.